Welcome back to Tightwad Workshop.
Hey, what is this? Get your own channel. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Tightwad Workshop. Again, in this episode we're going to have a look at how to clean and sharpen hedge clippers, or they may also be known as hedge shears in your part of the world. I've selected these two pairs because they are a reasonable sample of the kind of things you're likely to find. As you can see, this pair has a straight cutting edge on the shears, and this pair has a wavy cutting edge. Now both of those have their advantages and disadvantages. The straight edged ones are easier to sharpen, but the wavy edged ones generally perform a little bit better when you're trimming hedges. Now if you have a lot of hedge to trim, you're probably better off using an electric powered device like this. But these ones still have their uses if you have a small amount to do or you need extra control. Now for both pairs, our starting point is taking this bolt out that holds the two halves together. On this set, this is simple. It has this moulded plastic nut so that you can just unscrew it by hand. Now this one also has a clicker mechanism. The ramps on this little metal spring engage with the notches on the underside of the nut to make a click. That stops the nut from unscrewing while you're using the tool, and it also lets you dial in more tension by going one click at a time. Once we've got that off, we can just take the two sets of jaws apart and pop the bolt out. Now to avoid losing any of these parts, I'm going to put the bolt back together and set it to one side. Our second set of hedge clippers is held together with a regular bolt, so we're going to need a spanner to undo this. Now, if ever you have the choice between using an adjustable spanner or a fixed one, you should always use a fixed one. And if you have the option of using the open end of the spanner or the ring end, you should also use the ring end. This way you're a lot less likely to damage the nut while you're trying to undo it. So once we have the nut off, this one looks pretty much the same as the other one, and you can see this one doesn't have a straight cutting edge. So both these sets of shears have been a bit neglected and they've gone a bit rusty. So our first step is going to be to clean those up. We'll do that with some sandpaper. And this is going to make quite a mess, so it's a good idea to cover your bench first. Now, the sandpaper I'm going to use is nothing special. It's just a 120 grit for metal. Anything around a 100 grit works pretty well for this. Coarser, it leaves scratches on the metal. Any finer and it will block up too quickly. I'm also going to use this cork sanding block. So I'll just sit that down on the edge of the bench so it sits flat and work along this flat side with the sanding block. So as you can see, that doesn't take very long. And our surface is now relatively smooth and shiny. Any kind of cutting tool that uses a shear action like these will have a flat side and a side with a bevel on it like this. Now we're going to clean this side up as well. It won't make any difference to the performance of this tool, it'll just make it look more pretty. The important thing with a shearing tool like this is that the flat side is nice and smooth so that the flat side of its partner can slide against it without getting jammed or caught. I'll clean up the other side of these clippers in the same way. Now if we wanted to, we could stop at that point, just reassemble the parts with a little bit of lubrication oil on the pivot, and these will be working at 9 out of 10 efficiency. That's really all that you need to do for a set of garden shears. It's not necessary for these to be razor sharp to do their job. They're just cutting twigs after all. And if you do go to the trouble of putting a razor sharp edge on a pair of shears like this, it's not going to last very long. Let's just clean up the other set in the same way. Now we can just put these back together and go back to work as it is, but that would make this a fairly short video. So let's get the oilstone out and see if we can put a 10 out of 10 sharpness onto these shears. I'm using the coarse side of the oilstone, and I'll start by lubricating it with some dishwashing liquid. Now I'll sharpen these straight-edged shears first because they're a lot easier to do than the curved ones. We're going to start by resting this primary bevel on the stone. So I sit it down and rotate it until it's rested on the primary bevel. Then I'll rotate it just a tiny little bit more to a secondary bevel. That'll be about the same 22.5 degree angle that we used for our kitchen knives. We're going to use very small downward pressure. Most of the force is going to be pushing forwards. So we'll do a couple of slides like that. Now what we're going to do, while we push it forward, we're going to push it to this side so that we cover the whole length of the blade on the stone. So all we're trying to do here is develop a shiny edge here for the secondary bevel. As you can see, I've got a little bit further to go with that. So I'll fast forward this next bit. Okay, so let's have a look at that. With a bit of luck, you can see that we now have a shiny edge all the way along. So that's taken any remaining residue of rust off our cutting edge. I'll do the other half in the same way. Now for this one, because of the angle of the handle, I don't have clearance on the bench, so I'm going to have to turn around this way. Okay, let's have a look at that. And as you can see, we now have a shiny edge all the way along there. So we'll sharpen the curved blades in the same way, but having these in and outward curves just add an extra level of difficulty to the task. This shape of stone isn't ideal for sharpening this surface, but it's what we've got, so we'll see how we go. So it's a bit harder to see this time, and it's a little bit patchy because I haven't been able to get right into all of the dips, but it should still do a reasonable job. So now we're ready to put them back together. We're going to add a bit of this oil to them. So this is just a basic mineral oil. It's about the same thickness as olive oil. You can tell from the sound of it when I shake the bottle. We use this thicker oil because it tends to cling to the blades better and help avoid the corrosion. So we'll start by just putting a bit on each blade, and I'll use a clean piece of paper towel to wipe that across all of the surfaces. So this is just to stop the rust a little bit. Now we'll also put a little circle of it on this pivot area where the two blades move together. Now we'll get our bolt. And as we can see on this one, it has a square section at the very head of the bolt. That goes through the square section on this blade. So I'm holding that in place with my finger while I put the other blade on top. Then we have this split washer and this nut. You might be able to see that this nut has a plastic insert in it. It's usually made of nylon. That nylon is intended to give some extra friction to stop the nut from unscrewing while you're using the tool. So you want to adjust the tension on these such that they're easy to pull apart, but they should also sound like a pair of barber's scissors. Now I think this one can go a little tiny bit tighter, so I'll go about 1/4 of a turn. And now that's quite tight and difficult to pull back open, so we'll take about half of it back again. So 1/8 of a turn. Now, hopefully you can hear these if I hold them up to the microphone. That's the sound that you're looking for to adjust the tension. And you should be able to hear the same sound. Okay, so let's take these out to the hedge and give them a test. Now there's one other thing I should mention before we go. These blades look straight, but in fact they have a very slight curve on them. Now that's intentional because with any shearing tool like this, it needs to maintain contact between the blades as it moves from the base all the way up to the tip. So if you look closely, you should be able to see that there's an air gap in between here. That's normal. So if the tips of your shears are apart from each other like this, they're not going to cut properly. Now, sometimes you can put that curve back in by opening the shears up like this and giving it a couple of taps with a hammer, but Just do 1 or 2 gentle taps and test. Work your way up to it. Don't try and do it all at once. So that covers pretty much everything that I know about cleaning and sharpening garden shears. In our next video, we'll be looking at secateurs. Hope to see you for that one too. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. This is like a Stanley Kubrick set. Now, what's a line that you will never hear on the set of a Stanley Kubrick movie?
Welcome back to Tightwad Workshop.
Well, that's one of them. But the other one is, that first take was perfect. We won't bother doing any more.
No, that's right, yeah.
Okay, action.
Welcome back to Tightwad Workshop.
Take 2, 3.
No, I've got to wait for that guy now.
Don't walk.
Whatever he's doing.
One more for luck.
One for the King. I'll say this for King Charles. I didn't vote for him.
Oh dear, that's funny.